Mark Pope and Big Blue Nation went into May fully expecting Malachi Marino to be back next season, but after some really positive news during the NBA Draft Combine, Cats, you may have a reason to panic.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of the show, we're going to be breaking down the latest news surrounding Malachi Marino as he makes his way through the NBA Draft Combine. Some bad news, positive for Marino, but some bad news possibly for Kentucky. Will Marino end up staying in the draft? We'll talk about that on today's episode, as well as I'm going to make the case. I'm going to make the argument that this year's Kentucky team under Mark Pope is better than last year's team, and it will be even better, like legitimate SEC championship caliber, if they can add Milan Momcilovic. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, not so good news here, Big Blue Nation. According to Kevin O'Connor over at The Ringer, Malachi Marino will not take part in this week's NBA Combine 5-on-5 scrimmages. For those of you not aware, and Jason Markham wrote this over at Sea of Blue, that's usually a sign that a player likes where his NBA stock is, and he doesn't want to risk damaging it in scrimmages. Players like Marino, at least we expected players like Marino to come into this draft combine to get his measurements and to actually play some of these 5-on-5 scrimmages to get some ideas from scouts as to what he needs to improve on. The fact that he's not doing that as a freshman heading into his sophomore year potentially indicates that he's got the info he wants. He likes what he sees or hears from scouts and from these different teams, specifically the Knicks that he's worked out with. And he's saying, look, I don't want to injure myself or potentially risk making myself look worse. I'm just going to sit this one out. Kevin O'Connor also noted that there is a pretty strong chance, that's a direct quote, that Malachi Marino would be drafted in the first round this year. There is now a very real chance that Malachi Marino could stay in the draft, and that could completely screw up Kentucky's 2026-27 roster. I think Pope has had a horrible offseason. If he was able to land Momcilovic and he was able to keep Marino, I think a lot of people would be really happy about where Kentucky's going, and the advanced analytics would actually reflect that. We'll talk about that later in the episode. But because of losing out on Tyron Stokes, because of whiffing on all these different portal prospects, and then you lose the guy you said effectively you were going to build around, and you expect to be, you are on record publicly saying he's going to be the best center in college basketball next season. For you to lose him would be horrible. I think the little positive that you could take away from it is that Mark Pope developed a center that wasn't expected to play this season into a first-round pick, which good for Pope in a year full of failures that he was able to get a first-round draft pick out of last year's team. I mean, JQ will obviously get drafted in the first round as well, hopefully. But there's a little bit of reason to panic here now. And I said it might have literally been the most recent episode up until this point. I was like, until Malachi Marino announces that he's staying in the draft or we get more information indicating that he's going to do so, I'm not going to sit here and panic on the show. We'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, the bridge is being burned way before I thought it would be. I thought we would get through this week. I thought it would be like a week and a half before we really started to get some clarification as to where Marino stood. This feels like pretty good clarification from a very, very credible source in Kevin O'Connor over at The Ringer. I'll push back on it a little bit here because let's look at the other side of this. Maybe there's no reason to panic about Marino just yet because as good as he might be, he's still got a pretty solid offer waiting for him if he wants to come back to Kentucky. I would also just go up there and assume he's not gotten any sort of promises from any team yet, but he's probably gotten good news. So it's not a guarantee that he's going to stay, right? He's still, according to reports as of today, he's still more likely to come back to Kentucky, but it's coming closer to 50-50 at this point. So Kentucky's got money to pay him, and as good as he might be, he's still more than likely to come back. There's no guarantee he's going to stay. There's also no guarantee he's got a first-round grade. This is only coming from one guy in Kevin O'Connor. He also, in my opinion, and I think Marino knows this, frankly, I think he's got to improve his game a little bit more if he wants to be more NBA ready. Malachi Marino is a very good player, very high floor player. I've raved about him for over a year. But I think if this were Louisville, if this were Duke, if this were Carolina, and I was looking at this former 5-star center, yeah, as a rival, I'd want him gone because of how good he is. But at the same time, I'd look at it and I'd be honest, and I'd say he's got a lot of things to work on. If he wants to better himself for his future, it'd probably make a lot more sense to come back for at least one more year and play with this team. Because I would argue another year with this backcourt could only help him. Kentucky didn't have creators that were healthy last season. They had one creator, and he wasn't healthy the entire year. Now they've got multiple. They've got several that they can choose from. And we're going to be breaking it down here in a moment, and I'm going to be explaining why I think this year's team is better than last year's. We're going to go position by position. It's going to be a deep episode. But for Marino, I mean, you get, I think, a more talented roster than last season, a little bit deeper in the backcourt, players that can get you the ball, that make you look better. I mean, your counting stats, I think, will improve. I think that an offseason to develop another one could only help you. It only benefits you to come back, get a ton of money, and then go back to the draft, because at that point, you may be bordering on lottery. If you really do stand out this year as Kentucky's like prime time focal point center. So there's a little bit of reason to panic. I would not sit here and lie to you and say, oh, it's going to be fine. It might truly end up being fine. I mean, I would still lean that way right now if I had to pick one, if I had to pick a direction. But it's something to be aware of. It's legitimate reporting. It's not good news. And if this falls through, we got a huge hole on next year's roster. You got to find a way to bring Marino back. We'll continue to monitor the situation, obviously. But this ain't good. Is this year's team better than last year's? I think so. I think Malachi Marino would have to come back for that to be a definitive. But I think that this year's team is better than what we saw a season ago. And I want to go position by position. I want to break this down in as much detail as I possibly can. Get ready. Get your popcorn. This is going to be a very interesting show. Before we dive into it, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and every single possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, you can turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets for just getting started. You can check stats, trends, matchups before making your picks, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed. Whether you're looking at player props or just following your favorite stars, it adds another level of excitement to every game. The app is super easy to navigate as well, and it makes playoff basketball even more exciting from start to finish. You can head to FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel. Play your game. All right, continuing along here on today's episode of the show, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would love it if you did so. Talking about Malachi Marino, there's no reason to flip out full-on meltdown panic yet, but you might want to get a little worried, Big Blue Nation, because this is not great news coming out of again Kevin O'Connor over at The Ringer. I want to talk about something positive here for a second. We'll pause for water. because this is about to get real. Okay. I think that this year's Kentucky team is better than last year's. And I understand and want to acknowledge here that the optics, the vibes, the emotion, the opinions of Mark Pope, his staff, and this roster are very negative right now. And I think there's a lot of reason to be worried and upset about the future of Kentucky basketball. There are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of reasons to be upset. There are a lot of reasons to be frustrated. Kentucky expected to have a bit of a different team. If I had to guess, they expected to have some different players here. Unfortunately, they did not end up getting a lot of the players that they wanted, or at least it was perceived that they wanted. And so here we are now with a roster that could still take a Milan Momcilovic, but a roster that still, regardless, I think is better than last year's. And so what I would like to do today, as just kind of a little bit of an experiment, is go through each position group here and or each position, I mean starting and backup at each spot, 1 through 5, and explain whether I think Kentucky's better, improved at each position, or if they're not. We'll start here at the top. at the top with Zoom Diallo versus Denzel Aberdeen. I'm not going to sit here and try and make the argument between this year's team and last year's team healthy. I still think that this year's team is better than last year's team healthy, by the way. But that's not the team we saw. The team we saw was Denzel Aberdeen at point guard because Jalen Lowe was not healthy. Zoom Diallo is a better true starting point guard over Denzel Aberdeen. It's a pretty easy explanation. His profile is much more built around, it's more easily built around primary creation and advantage generation. He's a point guard. He plays like a point guard. He's a better point guard. Diallo's advanced metrics are also really, really good for an elite guard. 97th percentile overall in BPR, 98th percentile in offensive BPR, 95th percentile in playmaking projection, 97th percentile in scoring volume. Averaged almost 16 a game, 4.5 assists, shot 49% from the floor, 82.5% from the charity stripe. Really, really good metrics for a point guard here. Aberdeen was not. The biggest thing here for Zoom is only 25.5% of his makes were assisted. Most of his offense was self-created through ball screens, downhill drives, a transition, ISO ball. And for him to do that and shoot nearly 50% from the floor, that's legitimate real point guard creation to also have the 30% plus assist rate that he did. Aberdeen was a more solid player and more efficient player within structure. Only 1.3 turnovers per game. Also decent counting stats as well, 13.5 points, 3.5 assists, 36% from deep. But his profile, this is a no duh, but I'm walking you through this here, is more of a combo guard, connective piece than an offensive engine. And Pope kind of had to make him a point guard, and it wasn't fair to him. It wasn't fair to Kentucky. Nearly 44% of all of his makes were assisted. 46% of his shots came from three. He projects for Florida next season more naturally as a secondary creator and an off-ball spacer. It's what he was supposed to be at Kentucky. It's not what he was. Zoom is a better point guard. There's also, I think, a ceiling difference here. Aberdeen is a safer, cleaner, steadier offensive fit across the board, but Diallo is significantly higher when it comes to upside and just offensive creation, who can pressure the rim, collapse defenses, carry possessions, do more things that a point guard can do. Diallo is a better bet. He can bend a defense in ways that Aberdeen probably can't consistently. So I think Kentucky is better at starting point guard. At backup point guard, you can argue this in the comments below. Mason Williams is probably a better backup point guard over Jasper Johnson, largely because he fits the archetype better and fits the position more naturally. It's the same thing with Aberdeen. Jasper's freshman year statistical profile, here's what I wrote down. Looks like an off-ball combo guard. He's a movement shooter, secondary handler. He's not an actual lead guard. We know how bad he was at times for Kentucky whenever he was forced into action and forced to run point. It's just not what he does. Kentucky's offense bogged down when Jasper was asked to run point, barely the limited amount of time he was. Defenses weren't forced to consistently collapse. They trapped him. They pressured the ball. They were overly aggressive, and Jasper continuously made wrong decisions. And his shot diet does not indicate that of a backup point guard, somebody that leads the offense. The overall experience felt rough. His underlying numbers weren't terrible for a freshman role player. Like, he still shot 34% from three, 50.3% effective field goal percentage, 80th percentile in scoring projection, 83rd percentile in playmaking projection. But at the end of the day, it does come down here to essentially role fit, where Jasper, I think, is a better off-ball player. He's not a point guard. He's not a backup point guard, period. Meanwhile, Mason Williams, I think, projects more naturally towards tempo control, downhill creation, ball handling is just more consistent. I think he's a stronger player, probably going to be more comfortable at initiating offense. This, by the way, this is if he plays. This could be Alex Wilkins here. All these different things matter because if your backup point guard can't consistently pressure a defense or create advantages, offense becomes really fragile really quick. We got to see that with Jasper. Jasper might end up being a better offensive player at Oregon, but Mason, his archetype and the way that he plays the game is just more better fit to be a backup point guard. So I think that Kentucky is better there at backup point. They also have a third guy here, technically, in Zion Hawthorne, who is now actually a legitimate 3-star, according to On3 and 24/7 Sports. Kentucky didn't have a third option at point guard last year. Wilkins or Morton will take this spot before Hawthorne does, Zion does, but it's still great to have depth. Alex Wilkins versus Colin Chandler. Let's move to the 2 spot here. So I think across the board, Kentucky's better at point. Wilkins versus Chandler is an interesting argument. I could see you going either way with this. Here's how I'm going to frame it. The argument for Alex Wilkins over Colin Chandler is that Pope wants offensive pressure. That's the way his system works. It works with tempo and players stressing a defense. And Wilkins creates offensive pressure constantly. At least that's what he did in his freshman year at Furman. Even with the efficiency concerns, Wilkins still averaged almost 18 a game, 5 assists per contest, and nearly 18 shots generated or created per game between scoring and assists. Also, the shot chart, the diet matters here. Only 22.4% of his makes were assisted. Tons of self-creating offense, strong rim finishing, elite short to mid-range efficiency. It's a player creating advantages for himself here. It's not just a player benefiting from structure, but you put him in this structure. And when you put him in this Mark Pope system, which is built around pace, spread spacing, quick decision-making, downhill attacks, secondary creation, advantage basketball is what it comes down to, and you pair him with somebody like Zoom, Wilkins is a much better, more versatile player than somebody like Chandler because he can do a lot more. He can score in a lot more ways. He can play make a lot better. He's just overall a more well-rounded prospect. If you want to make the argument that Kentucky doesn't need a second creator alongside Zoom, I can see that argument. I could see you saying Chandler is the perfect off-ball spacer with his elite shooting efficiency and his size, I guess. But you also have to take into account that neither of these players, Chandler or Wilkins, were very good defenders at all. So if you're saying that, oh, well, the advanced metrics say that Chandler was this, that, or the other defensively, he wasn't. I mean, you can literally go watch the film and watch him struggle off ball. It is horrifying how bad he was at times, just leaving players open. So if I'm going to pick one or the other, elite shooting or more versatility, I'm probably going to pick more versatility because I want to be able to attack a defense in multiple ways with somebody that can also play make a little bit because of Kentucky's injury issues in the past. Wilkins, by the way, is also probably going to have a lot more space than he did at Furman because, again, his shot diet came from late shot clock creation, heavy usage burden, just having the ball in his hands all the time, self-generated offense, difficult pull-up shots. At Kentucky, he won't need to carry the same burden. He's got Zoom Diallo. He's got other players around him. He's got Justin McBride, who we'll get to in a second. You could envision here, and this is what I wrote down, you can envision Zoom collapsing a defense and Wilkins attacking rotating defenders, more transition opportunities, cleaner catch-and-go situations, and just less defensive attention overall on one player or the other. So that realistically improves three-point percentage, just overall efficiency, turnover rate, and decision-making. And the other thing that Pope attends to value is guards who can attack tilted defenses aggressively. And Wilkins just has clearly a better on-ball presence than Colin Chandler ever did. And as we have said already on the show before, we talked about this with Wilkins, we've talked about this with Diallo. In March, there's a very real argument that self-creation and the ability to handle the ball and be a better point guard, combo guard is better and more important than cleaner role player efficiency, at least at your 1 and your 2. Because eventually, somebody's got to create a shot against a set defense, and for you to have 2 of those guys is really good. That's your pro Wilkins argument here. The risk is that with the inefficiency, I mean, you could scale that to the SEC level with 3.8 turnovers per game, shooting less than 33% from deep. It's dangerous here. It's significantly more volatile what Pope is gambling on. But if you believe that Mark Pope thinks Wilkins can simply just simplify his offensive shot diet and unlock him as a secondary creator and more of an off-ball player instead of a primary engine, then you can absolutely see the appeal here. It's not something you have to sell yourself on. It makes a lot of sense. This is another case where I think Kentucky has significantly higher upside and than somebody like Colin Chandler. And so that's why I think Alex Wilkins is better at the starting 2 guard spot than Colin Chandler. Jerome Morton. Kentucky didn't have, by the way, at the end of the last season, at the end of last season, they didn't have a backup shooting guard because of injuries. It was Chandler who played almost all the minutes there, and then Owe would slide up for about 15% of the minutes at shooting guard in certain lineups. But it was basically Colin Chandler. The fact that you have Jerome Morton here, I mean, you're winning against nobody. So I think that Kentucky's better at the 1 and the 2 than they were a season ago. Let's continue to go about this, break this one down here for you. We'll get to small forward, which is, I think, a very, very interesting argument as you wade deeper into Kentucky's depth here. Before we do it, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Rocket Money. If you ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of your subscriptions, spending, bills, it can all get really overwhelming really, really fast. And that's where Rocket Money comes in. It helps you take control of your finances, and it's all in one place. It tracks your subscriptions in one spot, can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It automatically categorizes your spending so you can actually see where your money is going. You can actually set budgets, get alerts, stay on top of upcoming bills. It makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. It's a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Again, join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, wrapping up today's episode of the show. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Thanks you so much for tuning in. Subscribe wherever you are watching. We are breaking down why I think Kentucky has a better team than last year's. We have gone through the backcourt. I think Kentucky is better at literally every single spot, at the 1 deep, at the 2 deep, and the 3 deep, technically, if you want to get there with Zion or Wilkins or what have you. Kentucky's better. I would say they have a significantly better backcourt, just simply because of Diallo and Morton. And that's if everybody can stay healthy, knock on wood. Otega Owe is clearly better than Cam Williams at small forward. At your 3 spot, you haven't upgraded. Now, if you get Momcilovic, kind of know where I'd go with that take, but Otega is better. Let's talk about Cam for a second. Because Cam might be the cleaner long-term fit for the modern space-heavy basketball that Kentucky's going to want to play. This argument that you could make here between Owe and Cam, because now you've effectively shifted your scoring production up to your 1 and your 2 and down to your 4. You can make the argument in terms of fit and role that this is basically some elite slashing pressure and role scalability with Owe, points per game, etc., as a proven SEC scorer versus a very high-end 3-and-D projection guy. So Mark Pope actually talked about this in the question that he answered for me about, is Cam Williams ready to be a starter? And he gave some advanced analytics stuff. I'm going to get to that in a moment. Owe's biggest advantage here is that he is a legitimate offensive engine, or at least was for Kentucky, kind of had to be on the wing. 18.6 points on 14 shots per game. 42% of his shots were at the rim. or excuse me, 64.3 at the rim, 99th percentile scoring volume. It's extremely difficult to replace. Again, Kentucky's trying to do it in other spots, the 1, the 2, and the 4. His profile is going to be downhill pressure, transition offense, physical drives, self-created paint touches, scoring and isolation, foul generation. Even though his jumper was still kind of shaky, I mean, it ended up being above average for sure. Defenses still have to react to him because of the rim pressure. Owe was a unique player, and he's going to be missed. Cam's profile is virtually the opposite. It's a lot cleaner of a role fit here because I think that he's more of a spacer, an efficient rim finisher but doesn't get a ton of rim touches. He's a connective player, and is a defensive playmaker. The shot profile, shot diet shows it. 73% of his shots were from deep. 96% of his threes were assisted on. Extremely low usage offensive role. He is a connector. He is a glue guy. And the thing that Pope talked about that was most interesting is that, well, he's a really good player on defense, and the advanced analytics love him. And the efficiency and impact numbers are outstanding, according to Evan Mia. A- overall BPR, 96th percentile defensive BPR, 98th percentile overall core impact, 93rd percentile three-point projection, 93rd percentile two-point projection, 93rd percentile turnover avoidance. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's an efficient offensive player, and he's one of the best players on the floor defensively. Elite 3 and D wing. Great complementary piece. So the difference here is creation burden, and I don't think Cam could handle it if he was asked to put the ball on the floor every other possession, basically. Whereas Owe had to carry the offense, Cam's not going to even be asked to get anywhere close to that. Owe's shot diet was more dramatic. It was harder. Cam's offense is going to be more dependent on structure and set up opportunities. Hey, look, we got two of the best creators in basketball at the 1 and the 2. There you go. Owe's still the better overall player today, but Cam's profile, I think, could possibly scale a lot cleaner beside Zoom Diallo, Alex Wilkins, because he spaces the floor better than Owe did. He defends at a consistently higher level. He doesn't need touches to be an impactful player, and he thrives as a low-maintenance connector. So right now, Owe's the better player because Kentucky needed him to be who he was. But, and this is what I wrote down. This is my final note here. If Cam's off-the-dribble game grows at all, his archetype becomes incredibly valuable because elite defensive wings who shoot efficiently without needing usage are premium players in modern basketball, and they are premium players on the best teams in the nation. So it's an interesting thought, at the very least, between Cam Williams and Otega Owe. Yes, Owe's the much better player, no duh. But when you think about fit, you can't not be excited about the numbers for Cam and then just the tape for Cam as well as a shooter. He pairs very well with your backcourt. On to backup small forward. This is interesting to me because it's Braden Hawthorne versus Cam Williams. It's Braden Hawthorne now versus Cam Williams last year. Braden Hawthorne actually probably projects as the better backup small forward, in my opinion, compared to last year's Cam Williams because his archetype offers more versatility and upside in a bench lineup. So while, yes, Cam might be the best connector in Kentucky's starting five-man lineup, Braden Hawthorne gives you juice off the bench, and that's incredibly valuable to have guys who are versatile and can impact the game in a variety of ways that come off the bench like that. So Cam is elite at what he does, but Braden can do a lot more things and have maybe just a little bit of higher floor with all those different things. Again, last year, Cam was already playing an elite role, but offensively, his game is heavily dependent on structure. He goes best when other players go for him. He is a trailer. He's not the truck. He's not a creator. And Hawthorne's scouting profile is way, way, way more versatile. 6'8" with a 7'3" wingspan. He's a very fluid athlete. Self-creation flashes as well. He can be a defensive disruptor. He's got transition scoring upside. He can handle the ball. The fact that he's put on weight this offseason or last offseason, no, it was throughout the course of the season, I guess I should say. And he's going to continue to get stronger this summer is significant because it's going to set him up, prepare him for SEC physicality and learning how to defend multiple positions. Cam is probably the safer player and cleaner role fit, but Hawthorne may have the longer high-term upside off the bench, I want to continue to point out, because he brings the secondary shot creation, the size, versatility, transition offense, switchability. It's just more flexible. And if Hawthorne's jumper is reliable, 33, 34, 35 plus percent from deep, his overall toolkit makes him a more dynamic backup wing than Cam was last season. And on this year's team, I think that makes a lot more sense and is more to argue that that's more valuable, right? The third player here at small forward is Trent Noah versus himself. Basically, it's going to be the same version of Trent here at the 3 deep at small forward. Nothing really changes. I don't really think that there's anything to converse about here. Let's get to the 4 one more time for water. I know some of you. Never mind. Justin McBride versus Mo Diabate is the most difficult argument that you can make out of all 5 of these starters, I guess I should say. Because Diabate, in a vacuum, is probably a better overall starting power forward because of his elite defensive impact. But when it comes to system fit, when it comes to Mark Pope fit, Justin McBride is way better. Look at the advanced numbers from Mo. 96th percentile in overall BPR, 98th percentile in defensive BPR, 97th percentile in rebounding, 90th percentile in steals, 89th percentile in blocks. He was efficient at the rim. He was a bully ball player at the rim. His problem is that he couldn't space the floor. He couldn't handle the ball. He couldn't space the floor. Justin McBride is basically the opposite of what Mo Diabate was. He is a significantly more polished scorer. He's got way more perimeter skill. He is a much better ball handler and has infinitely better shooting touch. Offensively, he's awesome. 15 a game, 40% from 3, balanced shot profile, legitimate mid-range scoring, can attack closeouts and face up consistently. Has more gravity. He's a bigger weapon than Diabate was offensively. He improves Kentucky's half-court offense and spacing way more than Mo did. The problem with McBride are his impact metrics, the advanced stuff. 20th percentile in court impact, 11th percentile in defensive impact last season at James Madison. Far less defensive playmaking and activity than Mo. So Mo Diabate is winning more possessions. Justin McBride is winning because of his shot making and offensive skill. I believe it was Brandon Ramsey over at KSR that literally just put out a scouting profile breakdown of Justin McBride. It is incredible. It's free. Go look at it. It's over on KSR. It kind of breaks down my thoughts basically of why McBride is a cleaner offensive fit and this more spaced out 3-point heavy offense. McBride is a better player for Mark Pope. Diabate is probably a better player at the 4 just because of how good he is defensively and how tough of a player he is. But for Pope, McBride is an infinitely better system fit and will likely end up being a more impactful player for Kentucky because of just how good his scoring is, because of the way Kentucky's going to utilize him and want him to be used. The problem with Diabate so often last season is he would get the ball out on the perimeter. He's not a legitimate shooting threat, and people just pack it in. And they say, Diabate, if you want to try and run downhill at us, we know you don't have a right hand. You are extremely shaky with the ball. We get a paw in there. We're going to turn you over. We're going to force you to make a bad decision. Diabate could not attack late close. He wouldn't get a closeout. He could not attack straight line drives to the rim consistently. He could not shoot. He could not play make. Kentucky needs more of that from their 4 if they want to be good under Pope. At the backup spot, Ousmane Ndiaye versus Andrea Jelvich. I'll try and make this quick here. Ndiaye projects as a better backup power forward because of his defensive upside, athletic tools, and SEC physical translation. He's 6'11" with length, mobility, and real weak side rim protection potential. He's got a much better opportunity to disrupt defensively than Jelvich did. He's the modern defensive chaos big type player who is also, I think, maybe a better lob threat, while also being a better spot up guy, a more entertaining player at the very least than Andrea Jelvich. Maybe Andrea has the better higher floor, and he was a more polished overall player entering college, but overall, Ndiaye, I think, has a higher defensive ceiling. He's way more athletic, and the physical tools I like a lot more, especially in SEC play, over Yelovich as a backup 4. And then at the 5, Malachi Marino versus himself. I think he's going to be better than he was a season ago. We've already talked about it. And then Frank Kepnang versus Brandon Garrison at the backup center spot. This is, to me, a pretty easy choice for me. I'd take Kepnang over Garrison last year as the backup center because he's a way better defender and elite rim protector. Evan Mia loves his defense. A- overall defense, 99th percentile in blocks, 97th percentile in rebounding. Yes, he's very limited offensively, but here's the simple thing. This is what I wrote in my notes. Kentucky doesn't need offense from their backup 5. They don't need it. They don't need it. Garrison was a better passer. He's got more face-up ability. He's probably a better ball handler. He's not a more consistent player around the rim defensively, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for SEC physicality and SEC length, and SEC want to. Garrison did not have those things, and so Kepnang is a better specialist here as a backup 5. At least that's my opinion. So at virtually every single position, Kentucky's better. You can make the argument about Wilkins versus Chandler. You can make the argument about McBride over Diabate. I think it's clear McBride's going to be better for the Cats. Diallo is better than Aberdeen. Wilkins is better than Chandler. Otega is better than Cam, but Hawthorne is better than Cam as a backup, and we don't know what Hawthorne is or how good he could be. He could be a starter by the end of the year. McBride is better than Diabate. Marino is better than himself a year ago. Kepnang is better than Garrison. I mean, at virtually every spot, Kentucky is better. Now, let me tell you what this doesn't mean. This doesn't mean Kentucky is just going to have an incredible season. This doesn't mean Mark Pope won't perform poorly and get fired. Doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean all of the bad things that have happened to Kentucky this offseason just go away. They just disappear because Lance Dawe said the team's better than last year's. That's not what it means. What it means is that on paper, while we have a lot of reasons to be upset with UK right now, it's not as doom and gloom as you think it is. It's not as good as you think it is. It's not as bad as you think it is. And the last thing that I will say here, and I need to pull this up because I accidentally closed it out. The roster as it is, according to Evan Mia, as it is somewhere between the 27th to 35th best team in the nation, which is about where they were last year. With Milan Momcilovic, they're top 15, borderline top 10. With a player like Alan Graves instead of Momcilovic, they are top 10. They're knocking on the door, and they're right where they want to be if they can get Momcilovic. As it stands, though, the roster is in good shape relative to last year on paper. They need to do more to move me, but I'm not as worried as I was. That's going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This one was a bit of a doozy, but I felt the need to kind of take a dive into this one to explain my thoughts fully. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You agree? You disagree? Drop it all there. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. Follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.